It is a true pleasure for me to welcome a friend, a mentor, Jane Strode Miller. Jane graduated from Knox in Russian Studies in 1981. She went on to earn an MBA from Southern Methodist University. She is truly one of the best food industry executives with experience ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies. I don't want to take away from too much of what Jane is going to talk about because she's going to share a lot more in her story coming up here in a moment. But I do want to thank Jane for being a generous and insightful partner to the college, startup term, and to the Center for Career Success. She has a unique story that I'm confident you will find inspiring. In 2017, Jane was a recipient of the college's Alumni Achievement Award. Then in 2019, she established the Jane Strode Miller Internship Fund at Knox to provide financial assistance for students participating in an internship that is unpaid and an unpaid experience over the summer in business, entrepreneurial, brand management, and a marketing role. And matter of fact, a few of our students and the past recipients are joining us on today. And so it's great to have all of you with us. And you didn't come to hear from me. And so with that, I'd like to turn the virtual stage over to Jane Strode Miller, and let's give her a warm virtual welcome. So Jane, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Can everybody see my screen? Great. I am so thrilled to be here today. It is just really my pleasure to come back to Knox. And as I was saying before we all got started, to the small group that was in the chat room before the whole group got let in, I wish we were in a common place together, because I think the energy that you have when we're in a big room is great, but in the new world we're in, I will try to replicate that as much as possible. Many of you are probably thinking, how could we possibly listen to Jane for 1 hour and 45 minutes? That sounds like way too much time. I promise you I will not be talking for that long. I actually probably have about 45 minutes of a little bit of a presentation, and as Eric said, we'll do a couple polls and we'll do a breakout room. And then for those of you that want to stay on, we've gotten a list of questions in advance that I would love to go through and have a dialogue about should you have the time to spend more time with us today. So first of all, thank you so much. So my topic for today is you don't have to be perfect, just be your best you. And where this came from was just many years of my own personal experience of really always trying to be perfect. And there's so many limitations to being perfect, and so many hurdles in terms of always trying to be someone who maybe is not yourself. And if anybody in the audience, and we'll do a little poll on that, has had that situation where you felt like you always had to be the best, what I'd like to do is sort of give you a couple of tools today about how you can maybe overcome that and help work through it yourself. So what I'd like to start with is to give you a little bit of my background. Eric hit on a couple of the things here, but just to give you a little sense of me. It's funny, I do a lot of speaking, and I used to only talk about my career, because I figured that's really why you're here, is because you heard that I worked at some big companies and some small companies, and you want that. But now I really like to share a little bit about my personal life, so you have a little bit more color about who I am and where I came from. So I am from Peoria, Illinois, just right around the corner from Galesburg. I was the first in my family to go to college, and I would be a trio student now if I was at Knox in the year of 2020. And I'm very, very proud that I was the first person in my family to go to college, and it's been very meaningful for me. And I've done a lot of mentoring of first generation students over the years, because I do think it's a unique responsibility when someone is the first in their family to go to college. I was second in my class at my Woodruff High School, and was very fortunate to be able to get a number of scholarships to go to Knox. My family was, I would say, not only was I first in my family to go to college, but we were also on food stamps, and I would say probably in the lower economic spectrum. So if it wasn't for Knox, I wouldn't have been able to have the kind of education, and I'll talk about that in a second, and career trajectory that I've had. Knox was very was very, very generous for me from both a financial aid and an academic scholarship standpoint, which made my burden in college be a little bit less. I was a Russian major. I have no kidding on here because, well, first of all, the Russian major doesn't exist anymore at Knox. It went away a few years ago, and the administration was kind enough to tell me that it was going away. And I actually became a Russian major because I was very, very good in languages. I had studied French and German in high school, and I was a foreign exchange student to Turkey. And so my whole plan was, when I went to Knox, was that I was going to get great grades, and I was going to study Russian because I was good at languages, which would help me get great grades. And then I was going to go on and be a lawyer. My whole dream, I didn't actually know a lawyer. I actually didn't know too much about what lawyers did, I have to admit, but I knew that lawyers were rich. And my whole goal coming out of Knox was I was going to be on the path to richness, and that's how it was all going to get started. And what actually happened when I graduated from Knox, as I moved down to Dallas, Texas, and because I didn't have very much money, I wanted to work for a year and get some work experience, and then go on and get my law degree. And in the course of my first year out of Knox, I had two jobs. One, I worked during the day as the receptionist at a local bank. And if these don't really exist too much anymore, but back in the day, if you were from a small town, and even though it was Dallas, it had small suburbs, you would walk into a bank and there would be a girl that would be at the front desk, and she would say, here's the tellers over here, here is the loan officer over here, the bathrooms are over there. And I was sort of the traffic cop for that bank. Didn't pay very much, so I also worked at night at Lord & Taylor in North Park Mall. And I sold ties to a lot of what I would consider very snooty rich ladies who didn't realize that Jane Strode, that was my maiden name, that Jane Strode was someday going to be a very famous lawyer, not the girl behind the counter at Lord & Taylor selling ties. So I had two jobs. I have to admit that it was a little bit of a struggle. I'd had an unbelievable career so far as a student, both in high school and at Knox, and going out in the working world was a little bit of a shock for me because of the jobs that I had at the time. But an amazing thing happened to me in that year that I was working those two jobs. One was I had the first exposure to business that I'd ever had. Back in the day when I went to Knox, there was not an option to study business as there is now. I think I saw John Spitell on here, who's done an amazing job leading that program. And I didn't have that opportunity. So working at the bank was my first exposure to business. And I actually fell in love with the opportunity. And so I took the LSAT as I planned so I could go into law school, but I also took the GMAT because I was really intrigued with the idea of getting into business. And as sometimes happens in the world, so any of you that are recent graduates, and maybe if you feel a little bit lost, not to worry, because there's so many things that are ahead of you that you don't even know yet. I took the GMAT, as I said, I took the LSAT, and I did mediocre on the LSAT, and I did amazing on the GMAT. And it was just absolutely incredible. And at that time, in that particular year, the Zales Corporation, for the first time, had a full scholarship for someone to get their MBA at Southern Methodist University. And the only requirement was that they had to have some retail experience. So think about this. I thought I was going to go to law school. I ended up getting a full scholarship from the Zales Corporation to get my MBA because I'd worked at Lord & Taylor at night in the tie department. So you just never, ever know how your career is going to evolve. And at the time, I was like, well, I know my dream is to be a lawyer, but I have the opportunity to get my MBA for free. So I'll get my MBA, and then if I want to go back to law school, I'll do that. And I have to say, so many years later, I would have been the world's worst lawyer. So I'm really glad that my career path evolved the way it did. I'll try to go through the rest of it a little bit faster. I married a wonderful guy, Michael Miller, in June of 1986. He passed away a number of years ago, but this is a very happy picture that I like to share about my life. The creatures that surround me now are all adopted senior animals. I have Grace, Prince, and Lucky, who are my 3 horses, and Bella, who's the newest addition to my family, who is a little poodle terrier. In my spare time, I'll talk to you about my business career in a second when I'm not running Lily Sweets. I'm very involved here at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I'm on the board of the Leeds Business School and involved with something called Watson Institute. If you have a chance to check that out, it's a great accelerator for entrepreneurs who are trying to make a difference in the world through social impact. And I also have a career advice website called janeknows.com, and I recommend that you all check that out. I got really involved with Leeds and Watson because I really love to work with students. And unfortunately, since I'm in Boulder, Colorado, it's not quite as convenient to pop into Knox all the time. So it's nice to have contact with students, which is why I got very involved with both of these organizations here. Now, a question that came up from one of my peers from 1981, John Nicolau, he asked this question, and I thought I would put this up front in my presentation, which is, can you give a specific example of how your education or your connection to Knox has helped you in your career? I want to start with the education piece first, and then I'll give a funny story about my connection to Knox. The specific examples, I guess, about how my Knox education has helped is actually more of a general answer, I'd have to say. I believe that a liberal arts education provides you with such a great foundation for thinking and critical thinking and solving problems. And I actually believe my Knox education is the foundation of every bit of success that I have had in my career. And I say that because the environment at Knox of having smaller classes, having really great dialogues with your instructors, and always being challenged to think and to question and to have a dialogue. You're not sitting in a room with 500 other students and just watching, waiting for it to be over so you could do something else. I mean, you're really required to participate. And it's such an important part of your education that I think that those thinking skills, as I'll take you through my big business career that I've had, was absolutely the foundation for all of my success. My funny story about Knox is this, which is when I graduated, as I said, and I went on and got my MBA, I had a dream to go to work for Frito-Lay in marketing. And it was kind of a long shot because at the time, really, they only hired MBAs, of which I was from SMU, but Frito-Lay mainly hired people from Harvard, and they hired people from Stanford and from other sort of well-known, more Ivy League schools across the country. And so I interviewed for the job and had 7 interviews in a day. And I actually thought it went really, really well and couldn't wait to get the job offer. And instead, I got a call that I was actually rejected and didn't have an offer. So I didn't go to Frito-Lay. I actually started my career in banking as a credit analyst. And kind of like if I would have been a lawyer, which I would have been terrible at, I found in my year as a credit analyst that that was not going to be my calling either. But about 9 months into my job as a credit analyst, I got a call from Frito-Lay. And what happened was that the year before, when I'd interviewed for the job, I'd interviewed with 7 people, as I said, and 6 people loved me, but the most senior person didn't. And because the most senior person didn't like me, I didn't get the job offer. Well, we dial the clock forward a year, and the call that I'm getting, which at first I thought was actually a practical joke, was that they wanted me to come back. And that it turned out that that most senior person who had vetoed me actually had left the company. I actually like to think that he was fired. I'm not sure what the true story is, but he wasn't at the company anymore. And the other 6 people were like, we don't remember the girl's name, but we remember that she was a Russian studies major from a little college called Knox, and they reached out to the Career Center at SMU. And as you might imagine, I was the only Russian major that had ever gotten an MBA at SMU. And so they were able to track me down, and I started my career there. So to John's question here, the general answer is the critical thinking that you're going to get and the opportunity to have great dialogues and really challenge your thinking will help you so much in your career, regardless of whether you're selling ties at Lord & Taylor or you're running a big company as I'll take you through. And there'll maybe be a funny story if you have a unique undergraduate like mine was in terms of people remembering you. So here's my career in a nutshell, because I want to spend less time talking about me. You can find about me on my website, and more about why you don't have to be perfect, just be the best you. But I started my career with PepsiCo, a division of PepsiCo called Frito-Lay. I rose to be the first woman president at Frito-Lay, an accomplishment that I'm quite proud of. But I'm even more proud of the fact that I was part of the team that brought chili cheese Fritos to the world. So the next time you're eating chili cheese Fritos, don't be thinking that I was a president at Frito-Lay. I want you to think about the fact that I was one of the people that came up with chili cheese Fritos. So you're welcome. I actually went on to Heinz. I was the chief growth officer, which was doing global sales and marketing and running the global Walmart account. And then I had the great fortune to be the president of Heinz in London, which was the second biggest division of Heinz. I came back to the United States and I was part of a team that got Hostess out of bankruptcy. So anybody who likes Twinkies, Ding Dongs, or Ho-Hos, you're also welcome because part of my job was making sure that they stayed in business. So this was like the first 25 years of my career. It was great. Big companies, a lot of big experience. And then I had the opportunity to become the CEO of Rudy's Organic Bakery. It's a national company. Maybe some of you have actually heard of it. It was a turnaround situation, an amazing experience based here in Boulder, Colorado, and was eventually sold to Hain Celestial, which is a big strategic in the natural and organic industry. And I have a career advice website, I said, called janeknows.com. And I, again, really ask you to check it out if you're looking for any kind of career advice. Now, what's interesting is I did big companies. I did Rudy's, which was a turnaround, which was successfully sold. And then you kind of go, oh my gosh, well, she had this great track record. How is it possible that she had two startups, both of which that failed? And several of you have questions about starting businesses and how you think about that. What I would tell you is that it's hard to start a business. And I think probably many of you are in the startup curriculum that Tim is running, and it's very hard. And the chances of success sometimes are much lower than you would expect. But I learned a ton from those experiences. And one was with a company called Cookie Chips, which was a thin, crispy cookie, and Pro-Yo, which was a high protein frozen yogurt, both of which I gave my all to, and neither of which were able to be successful. But everything that I learned from the two failed startups has helped me with Lily's, which is the most unbelievable experience of my 35-year career. Lily's is the fastest growing confection company. It's all about less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. About 82% of Americans are trying to cut back on sugar. And so we have a huge macro trend that is really boosting Lily's. And it's just been an amazing, amazing story. I hope to write a book about it, or maybe do a case study that one of you will get to study in the future. So that's my big background. Lots of different experience, from failed startups to big companies to really fast growth companies like Lily's to turnarounds like Rudy's. So a lot of different experience, which has been awesome. But my real passion is mentoring, and it really is helping people learn how they can not make mistakes in their career, many of which that I made along the way. So I have on my website something called 5 Tips About Career Stuff, and it's kind of an easy way to tackle all kinds of different topics. And I guess I have a little video series on that too. But today I'm going to talk about 5 tips about career stuff, about being your best you and not needing to be perfect. So Eric is going to launch a poll for us, and please answer right away so we can actually look at the score. So how often do you try to be perfect? Never. It's not a thing for me. More than I want to. I always try to be, or I am just perfect, so I don't even need to try to be perfect. Almost have everybody. We have about 10 more people, maybe 8. All right, that's probably about everybody that's going to answer if we've got 84%. So this is super interesting if you want to look at it. So the answer, most people have said that you try to be perfect more than you want to admit. And many of you also said, I always try to be. So you've got pretty much about 80%, actually more than that, 84% that in somehow are trying to be perfect. So that's actually a great segue into what I'm going to talk about. So actually, I think we want to maybe, do we share the results? There we go, and then we'll stop sharing. And then we'll just, I think we'll try to move on. Can we do that, Eric? Oops.
Yes, we should be able to. Is it off the screen?
It's on mine still. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
There we go. Thanks. Thanks, Eric. So most of you say that you try to be perfect more than you'd admit, and you always try to be perfect. Okay, this is probably why you're on this call today, because you want to find out how to not be perfect all the time. So I'm going to talk to you about 5 things. So my 5 tips about being your best you and not trying to be perfect. The first one is don't be afraid of failure. The second is control what you can control. The third is build your network with 5-minute favors. This is one of my favorite ones, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to do a little bit of a breakout on that. Surround yourself with a personal advisory board and keep learning about yourself. So I'll kind of take you through each one of these in a little bit of detail. So the first thing is don't be afraid of failure. It's really interesting because if you are trying to be perfect, it's really easy for you to try to do something new, because if you're really good at something, like why try something new? Because you might fail. And so there's a real kind of psychology around that, about if I just kind of stay in my comfort zone, I'm going to be perfect and I'm going to be good and I'm not going to make any mistakes. So I want to tell you about my first big experience of really taking a chance and not being afraid of failure. And maybe this will give you some ideas in your own life about how you can sort of expand your experience outside of your comfort zone. So on the left side of the equation is me giving a formal presentation at Frito-Lay about Chester Cheetah, being in front of the senior management of the company as I was a director in marketing. And back in the day, this was a very prestigious position. You had huge budgets because Frito-Lay had big advertising budgets, and you had the opportunity to always be really talking about big ideas, big concepts, big spending stuff. Well, what I saw at the time, I'd been in marketing both at Frito-Lay, I'd transferred up to Pepsi and come back to Frito for maybe about 8 or 9 years. And what I saw at Frito-Lay was that although marketing was a real powerhouse from a money standpoint and spending, what was happening at Frito-Lay was that the jobs that were really growing and developing were regional sales managers that were running big geographies in the company. And what was happening was, although there was a lot of spending happening in marketing, there was a lot that was being shifted out to what we would call the field. And in the field, where you'd have a fleet of salesmen that are going store to store. You've probably seen your local Frito trucks that are delivering to Walmart or to 7-Eleven or to Hy-Vee, any of the stores that you might be shopping at, that to go from marketing, which was this sort of very high exposure, very corporate type of job, to being based out of a distribution center where you had a lot of guys that were driving trucks and delivering product reporting to you, just wasn't a thing that happened, especially as a woman. People generally didn't leave marketing to go to sales, and there had never been a woman that had been in marketing that had gone to sales. But for me, what I saw was it was an amazing opportunity. I had been at a meeting where a guy was in one of these jobs, literally had 150 people in the room, and they were all like listening to every word that he had to say, and they were so engaged, and you could just tell that they would have done anything for this guy or gone anywhere. And so for me, when I saw that, I was like, I really want to go from this corporate job of presenting ideas to being somebody who is out in the field and somebody who is, working with the folks that are really on the front line of Frito-Lay. So this was super risky because my skill set was all about this corporate stuff. It wasn't about understanding how you run route trucks or how you call on customers. And so super risky. My first job was in the field was to go from corporate headquarters in Dallas to run a region that was based in Memphis, Tennessee. And the region covered Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, and Little Rock, Arkansas. And I had never had a field job before. I had never had salespeople report to me. And so it was on the surface entirely risky because I had to learn everything new. But I'll tell you this, it was actually a turning point in my career when I got outside of my comfort zone of saying I only can do what's on the left side of the equation, not what's on the right. And I was very fortunate that when I went into this particular job, I had an amazing staff of people, all men, and they were absolutely terrific, and they helped train me and guide me and respected my leadership and what I was trying to learn. And in the first year that I was in this job, my team, we won the Herman Lay Award, which was the most prestigious award at Frito-Lay. And we won it just, kind of in a landslide for the best market share growth, the best volume growth, and the best profit growth. And I was the first woman that had ever won the Herman Lay Award, and the first person who'd ever come from marketing who'd won the Herman Lay Award. And it really was my sort of recognition that when you take chances, you really learn and you can build. And so if I would have just tried to be perfect, I would have just stayed in the job that I was in. And by taking that chance, it really took my career to a whole new level. So I really would say, so the first thing is don't be afraid of failure. I could have probably equally have failed in this situation, but if I wouldn't have taken a chance, I wouldn't have known. The second thing is to control what you can control. One of the things for those of you that said you try to be perfect all the time is generally people that are trying to be perfect are also trying to be in control. And the fact of the matter, and have we learned it now more than ever in what's happened in the pandemic in the last 6 months, is there's so much that you don't control, but you actually control one thing, and it's how you react to things that are happening to you. And so I'd like to give you a story from early in my career. I was the Mountain Dew brand manager. And it was, quite an important presentation that I was going to give. It was the annual operating plan. And for any of you that have had some of the alums that are on the call, if you've worked for big companies, as a fairly junior person, you don't get in front of the president of the company and present without having like 5 layers of management actually see the presentation in advance. You really, you don't go in with a rogue presentation. You have all these people look at the presentation, they approve the presentation, they vet the presentation, they look at punctuation, they look at how the slides are laid out. The whole thing has been practiced, because it's almost more like you're going on stage for your final performance of something that's already been approved. And so with that kind of attitude, I was going in to speak to the senior management of Frito-Lay about the Mountain Dew plan. And just as a little bit of perspective, back in the day, Mountain Dew hadn't grown in a really long time, and carbonated soft drinks were growing in the single digits at the time. And so we had just introduced Diet Mountain Dew. And I was very proudly going to say that in that following year, of which the plan I was presenting, that Mountain Dew was going to grow 15%. So I get up in front of this very prestigious group of executives, and I put my first slide up on the screen, and I say, next year, Mountain Dew is going to grow at 15%. Now in this room, again, everyone who'd approved the message was there, and pretty much they had already bought into the plan. And so, as I said, next year, when it's going to grow at 15%, I pretty much assumed that the most senior person in the room was going to be like, Jane Miller, you are on it. That is awesome. But he didn't say that. What he said instead in this large room, and I'm literally 1 minute into a 60-minute presentation, the man at the back of the room, the most senior man, said, Jane, how do you look yourself in the mirror with a number like that? as soon as this presentation is over with, I'm going to find someone to take your job. I'm going to find somebody that will sign up for more than 15% growth next year on Mountain Dew. Now imagine you're 1 minute into a presentation, of which it's an hour, as I said. You're surrounded by all these people that have approved the presentation, and you get the one comment that you weren't expecting. In fact, you wouldn't have expected it at all. And the additional dynamic was that of all the people that had approved my presentation, not one person said a thing. Not one person said, oh, Mike, no, we approved this, or no, Mike, 15% is really good. Crickets. Nobody said anything. So here I am. What would you do? The first thing that came to mind was I wanted to start crying because I couldn't believe anybody could be that mean to me. My second very quick thought was I was going to run out of the room to never come back because I hated these people. But what I actually did was I finished the presentation. I had practiced it many times, was very, very confident in what I was presenting, and just finished the presentation. And I will tell you though, as soon as it was over, I ran to the nearest stairwell. I started crying like a baby because it was very upsetting. And then I immediately went down to the fitness center in Pepsi corporate headquarters and took a shower so I could just get it all off of me. Now, the interesting thing about this story, as you think about being perfect and how trying to be really your best you, not that perfect person, is I couldn't control what Mike said. I couldn't control what he was representing to me, but what I could control was my reaction to it. And that's what I was able to do. Now, many of you might be wondering, like, gosh, what was that all about? Maybe two questions, like one, why was he doing that? And maybe the second one, why didn't anybody speak up? Well, to the first point, why was he doing that? He actually thought, I learned this many years later, that I wasn't really tough enough for the PepsiCo environment. And this was part of his training to make sure I was tough enough to be successful. The second question, which I think is a better one, which is why did no one speak up, was because that everybody else in the room had presented to him before, and they knew that there was a high probability this is what was going to happen. And they also didn't want to be skewered by stepping up. Now, what I will tell you is this was a seminal moment in my career. Another one, because what I learned in that situation has been the major impact on my leadership style for the last 30 years, is that I would never let someone work for me get in that situation. They should have at least told me in advance that that was going to happen so I wouldn't be surprised. And so I would just, as you think about your leadership style and what's important to you, both for those of you that are in college and those of you that have graduated, is really think about what's super important to you and what your values are as a leader. And my number one value is that I always have the back of the people that work with me. So take situations like this where you don't control everything, that you probably want to be perfect, but you can't be. And again, remember that it's really your reaction more than anything else. So I know you're probably just about ready to have a little break and not keep listening to me. So we're going to do a breakout in a second. But what I want to talk to you about is this amazing concept about building your network with 5-minute favors. This is not my idea. This is a peer of mine on the board of the University of Colorado. And she came up with this idea, and I learned about it a couple of years ago. And I think it's so brilliant as you're trying to build your network, whether you're a student or you're an alum. And here's the concept. People are kind of intimidated by the thought of becoming a mentor, and the kind of time it takes and the kind of effort that it really takes to spend a lot of time with one person. And it's kind of daunting. And I think in a lot of ways it's daunting for you to try to ask for mentorship, or for a mentor like myself to say that I have the time to spend a lot of time with people. So Rachel's idea is a 5-minute favor. And here the concept is you think about people that you would like to ask a question to. And so you think about one question that you're going to ask in a 5-minute favor. And that question will be something very specific to that person. And it actually helps on kind of two ends. One, it sort of forces you to be very organized in your thoughts. But from a mentor standpoint, if I know you have one question for me and I know that question in advance, it's really easy for me to wrap my mind around spending the time with you. So a great way to build your network is to identify lots of people that you can ask for a 5-minute favor. So with that, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a breakout for 10 minutes. And what we're going to do is ask you in your breakout to identify, what kind of people would you ask a 5-minute favor? How do you identify people? Like, what are the ways that you identify people? And again, in the world where we're not doing as many social activities, what are your creative ways around identifying people for a 5-minute favor? And then what kind of questions would you ask that person?
Great job.
Oh my gosh, I love breakouts. Did everybody love the breakout? It's like so much better than talking. It's like the best. Okay, so we're going to start with my group, and Raf, take off your mute, and he's going to give he's going to sort of get the thing rolling, and then Eric's going to start calling on different groups to report out. So Raf, step up, man.
All right, so my name is Raf. I was obviously in Jane's group. I'm a senior at Knox this year. And so our conversation we talked about, how we identify people. And so Kelly in our group said, people are just interested in general. So, she just goes out and she just talks to people. And, she gave an example of an art class she took and how she was just talking with programmers. So it's like a group of people that she normally wouldn't speak to. And I think that was pretty interesting. I said, I just like to think of it as, at some point in your life, whether things go really well or go really bad, you're probably going to need people at some point. So, just reach out to as many people as you can. And then we also, we had a pretty fun a couple minutes just talking about, what the absolute worst thing that could happen to you. Because someone in our group said they were shy and, didn't really like reaching out. And so we thought of it as, what's the absolute worst thing? They could just say no, and that's about it. So it's kind of encouraging if you look at it from that viewpoint that it's just a no. It's not the end of the world. No one's losing their life or anything. So and I think that's pretty much what our conversation was about.
Yay, awesome. That was great. All right, Eric, who's next?
All right, let's go to group one. Julie, you want to unmute yourself for a moment and talk a little bit about the experience over in your room?
Sure. Well, we just we're talking and getting to know each other, but then one thing that I said is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Rad Montague. He's the founder of Kid President, and I'm a teacher, so I kind of follow him. But I have this book called Becoming Better Adults, or Grown-Ups, sorry. And I was just saying how a lot of times when you meet somebody, people always say, like, what do you do? And instead of saying that, you could say, and this is from him, but he just says, tell me something you love about what you do, instead of just the whole what do you do piece, because it just creates a better conversation.
That's awesome.
That's great. All right, Eric, who's up next?
Amy Zelke, I'd call on you over in room 2. Are you still on mute, Amy? Amy.
Sorry, I know. Sorry. So we had a couple minutes to try to get to know each other. Had quite a variety of people that were recent graduates. I'm still taking classes, so I'll be a brand new graduate, and then people that graduated quite some time ago. And I think we all kind of agree, just staying close and making connections with alumni of all ages and years graduated is huge. And then obviously being close with the Career Center, and just also being really involved in different social groups and social networks. I think just being involved in the community in itself just kind of keeps you connected. And it's kind of just amazing just how just general conversations, especially what I did, which for a long time, just talking to random strangers, I tend to get a lot out of them, whether they want to give it to me or not. They tend to just give it to me. So I think just striking up conversations with everybody at any given time, wherever and whenever, can just be very beneficial.
Thank you, Amy. Over in room through Beirut.
Hello, I'm a current student at Knox. In my group, I had Kendra and Tad, who's an alumni, who's an alum. And Tad was giving me wisdom on about like getting favors. And he was saying like people love to talk about themselves. So just really utilizing that to learn more about their experiences. And I was telling him that how do I get someone to stop talking about themselves? Because in my experience, sometimes it goes overboard on that end. And how do I like get to talk about, because a lot of times, especially with the things that the Career Center offers us, which is great, sometimes we have a time limit. And so as someone who's trying to build their network, I want to talk about specific things. So those were some of the thoughts in our group. I love to learn, but the time limit sometimes gets difficult.
Oh, Beirut, I know you were in a room with Tad, and Tad was at one of our networking events a few years ago, and so great information from him. So and you had quite a room there with Kendra as well. So anyway, that's good stuff. Thank you for sharing. Room 4 was, how about Paige Harrison? Would you like to share a few thoughts?
Sure. We talked about relationship building. We also talked about the benefits of having questions beforehand versus after the fact, and what was preferred in that sense. And I think we kind of arrived at the conclusion when data is involved, sometimes it's helpful for us to have more time. The questions beforehand are more helpful in cases where data is involved or where we have to maybe look stuff up for people that we don't know just offhand.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing. Jane, your room's up next. You want to call on somebody from that one?
Well, we already went, so.
Oh gosh, that's right. Yeah,
so yeah.
Rolf, you let it off. That's right.
You're bold.
The next one, I'd like to call on Craig. You were in with Jamie Spacco and Scott Crawford.
Yes, I was. Our big take home was rather than asking someone if they would be our mentor, if you see something that happened to them, like a career change or like a company that they work for, you could just go to them with a message and say, you know, do you have any career advice, or do you have anything to share about working in this industry or with this company? And if my summary is incorrect, my breakout room colleagues can correct me.
We also spent some time we spent some time discussing whether the question was actually which person would we want to get career advice from, and for whatever reason, in honor of the new Bill and Ted movie, we decided Genghis Khan. So there was that. So we weren't really much help to you, Craig. I am so sorry about that.
Go see the movie, I guess, right? Nice.
I found it very helpful.
Thank you all for sharing that, Craig. It's good to have you on the call, and Jamie, never a light moment from you. So thanks for those thoughts. And in our room 7, Anastasia, would you like to share a few thoughts?
Talked about how business was interpersonal and how the simple action of just walking up to a person and talking to them can break the ice, and you can learn a lot from each other, and then you develop more comfortability towards one another, so that whenever like there is like a favor, whether it's a 5-minute favor or more than that, you feel more comfortable talking to one another because you in a sense know each other more. You've broken the ice. So it's, you know, like John said, the only thing you can do is like talk to a person, ask them a question, and either they say no, but they'll never really say it's ridiculous. They'll either answer the question positively or they they'll just not answer.
That's
You know
awesome.
what? And if you ever get a person that doesn't want to answer or like is negative about it, like you don't want advice from them anyway. Like think about it that way. Like seriously, if you have someone that you ask a question to and that's a reaction, it's like I don't even want to know you, buddy. So I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of an easy way to think about it.
Let's see here. Olivia Gerson, you were in room 8.
Yeah, so I was speaking with a couple of students and a Knox alum, Catherine, forgive me, Heineke, I want to say. And so I first started talking about how you can kind of use people that are around you, you know, in your immediate surroundings. Obviously, my advisor is John Spatel. He's someone that I would go to for advice. And then Catherine kind of said, you know, it's definitely not just the people around you. Cold messages, cold asks, anything like that, cold emails, which I think a lot of people have mentioned are very useful and you shouldn't be afraid of them at all. And I think, you know, starting out, a lot of us who are building our networks can be afraid of that. And it's definitely not something to be intimidated by. And then as far as the types of questions that we would ask, we talked a lot about how there's just as much value in what you can bring to the table as what the other person can bring to you. And so I think asking questions that will get both people interested and have value for both sides is something that will really help you continue your network with that person and continue to build your network.
That's a great point, Olivia, that I think some people that you forget about is that I know for all the people that I mentor, I learn as much from you guys as you would learn from me. And it really is a two-way switch street. And I think having that attitude going in so much sort of helps the dialogue. You're coming from a position of confidence as opposed to, oh my God, I have to ask Jane a question. Like it's really one of those things where it definitely is a two-way street for sure.
Deja, you were in room 9. Looks like you were in there with Drew and Jalen, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, yeah, we talked about kind of like differentiating between talking like your supervisors or just like anyone, and you know, like is it networking if it's anyone? We're like, yeah, definitely, because yeah, we're all different majors. This is my second year out from graduation, and Drew and Jalen are both still students. But yeah, we had a CS major and business management. I did creative writing. But I mean, now I'm working something completely different than that. And we all kind of talked about just asking someone like what your first job was that got you into the career. Or, you know, I like to ask people in my interviews, like what's your favorite thing about this job? You know, just something like that to like on a positive note, just, you know, it's a quick and easy question. And yeah, that was just kind of it. We chatted about life. So.
Great. That's awesome.
Ryan Earls, you run with Adriana and John and Priyanka. I'd love to hear some of your feedback.
We talked about, the main thing that we talked about was getting into a room with people and finding commonality between you and the person you're talking to, and figuring out how you can leverage that commonality to ask them questions like, what's your story? How did you get to where you are? And using that to get what you need.
Hey, Ryan, how are you? I know Ryan.
Hey, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Jane, that's all the groups, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Well, that was so awesome. Let me see if I can share my screen again here and see. Here we go. Let's put that back. Okay, is that working?
Yep, sure does.
Okay, great. That was really, really awesome. Oh my gosh, there were so many things. Well, let me kind of lead into the next one because so many of the comments that you guys had really lead into my next tip, my 4th tip, which is surround yourself with a personal advisory board. Now, so the concept of the 5-minute favor is really about building your network. And it's really sort of, you know, building that out, getting different people to answer something specific. But there's also a concept that I wish somebody would have told me when I was in college was about building a personal advisory board. And this is why. Actually, let's do a poll real quick, Eric, and then I'll get into why it's important to have a personal advisory board. So could you all pick one? When do you look for a personal advisory board? And Ryan, you know the answer to this. So, but you should still vote. Okay, looks like probably everybody that's going to vote is
Okay.
we're pretty close there. So pretty much you guys actually know the right answer here, which is you really need to be building a board when you actually don't need one, because it's a lot easier to surround yourself with people when you're not feeling like you're looking for a favor. So that's a great, great answer there. So what I would say is when I was in college and when I first graduated, and for many years after that, I really felt like I had to be like Superwoman, that I really needed to have all the answers. And which is so crazy when I look back at it now, but I really felt like I needed to have a lot of answers. I mean, I was out of school and I was in my first jobs and I really needed to know stuff. And if you ever find yourself, and again, this kind of goes back to the whole concept of being perfect, that you feel like you know all the answers, you really don't need to feel that way. You don't need to feel like you have the big S on your chest, that you are a super person. It's really important to surround yourself with a personal advisory board. And so the difference from sort of the network is knowing a lot of people is having kind of like you guys have probably all heard about boards of directors. So like at a company like Lily's, we have a board of directors that have 5 people on it, and 5 people that all have very different backgrounds that all really complement my skills as CEO of Lily's. And I think each one of us should think about kind of in our personal lives, how do we also surround ourselves with go-to people for different things. So it isn't just like having one mentor, but it's having kind of this group of people, and you probably wouldn't ever bring them together in a room like I bring my board of directors together. But more even than bringing them together for my board of directors, I talk to each person individually about different advice and different thoughts that they have about the business. So the idea is to be super self-aware about yourself, understanding where you could really kind of complement your skills that you have, and to really sort of build people around you that can actually help you in different situations. So for example, you know, you might need Ahmed, if you don't mind that I mention you, who's in our group, was basically introverted, and we were really talking about how he can take advantage of getting more people in his network when you're not really comfortable with that. So finding somebody like Nikki in our group who was very extroverted and who could actually be someone who could help him become more comfortable with asking people questions. So how do you surround yourself with people that can help build your skills and help you in areas that maybe you're not quite so comfortable with? I think it's really important because I have in my current company, I have a lot of people that are in their 20s and 30s, and it's really easy for people to feel like you have to know everything. But what I tell you at my age is I know that you don't know everything. And I think it's really, really important that you kind of look at and try to surround yourself with people that you really kind of trust. So this is a really important thing that I wish somebody would have told me. My 5th tip is really about this self-awareness, which is to kind of keep learning about yourself and keep growing. Again, you know, it's so funny because I would have thought when I was the age of many of the people on the call that you'd sort of get to be my age and you'd be like, oh, you got it all figured out. Like there's nothing new to learn. And that's so far from the truth. I mean, it is one of these things where we just have to keep growing and learning as a person. And I'm going to give a really recent thing that happened to me that was a really big learning for myself. And it really actually really kind of triggered this whole concept of you don't have to be perfect, just be your best you. And I actually did a video on this for an event that was happening at Walmart because it struck me so strongly. So if we all dial the clock back a few months to when George Floyd was murdered, immediately there were a lot of reactions on social media about Black Lives Matter. And as a company, we really don't make a lot of kind of political statements. You know, we sell chocolate and we're trying not to get into politics and just really share our personal opinions. But on the Monday after his murder, as a company, we just sat here and we were like, we really are remiss if we don't say something, if we don't do something. So on the Tuesday after his murder, we joined a lot of people on social media with a blackout screen on all of our social media outlets, and thinking that, you know, we were part of the solidarity of what was happening in the aftermath. The immediate reaction was so shocking to me that the number of people that unfollowed us on social media, the number of people that, there were kind of both sides, people that were just like so negative about Black Lives Matter, and then other people who were like, well, how many people of color do you even have at Lily's? Like, what's your real position on this? Like, can you make a stronger stand? And it just sort of felt like, you know, our statement, which was literally just a blacked out screen, was either totally offensive or it was not enough. And so we really thought about it. And on that Thursday, we put out an announcement, which was, you know, we're just trying to continue to learn, to be better ourselves, to educate ourselves on Black Lives Matter, to really become, you know, more involved overall in the movement, and felt like that was, you know, was an important statement to make. Well, it was so interesting because the response was, again, super negative. I mean, there was some positive, but there was a lot of really negative talk on social media. And for me, this was like a really important sort of, you know, kind of turning point. And this was, you know, what, 3 or 4 months ago, which was I was trying so hard to make everybody happy with my response that I kind of made nobody happy, especially myself. And so I would say for my final tip on trying not to be perfect is just keep learning about yourself and be vulnerable, and know that, you know, you're not going to do everything right all the time. But if you do it from your heart, if you do something that you believe is really to be true, which was what we did on Black Lives Matter, then that's the best statement that you can make, as opposed to trying to make everybody happy. So I'm almost done with my presentation, then we could get into some questions. So again, the 5 tips: don't be afraid of failure, do something outside your comfort zone, control what you can control. Remember, it's again how you react to things that happen to you, especially when there's so many things that we don't control. As we talked a lot about, build your network with 5-minute favors. Surround yourself with this personal advisory board, and keep learning about yourself. You know, one of my final comments, actually, let me get to my final comment, then we'll come to the fabulous prizes, is, you know, for those of you who are students of history, you know who Winston Churchill is, a prime minister during one of the most difficult times in our world history, prime minister of England during World War II. And he had a saying that I've been using a lot since the pandemic, which is never let a good crisis go to waste. And it really is a unique opportunity for everybody here on the call, whether you're a student or an alum, to take advantage of the fact that we're in a time like we've never been before. And I think people are more open than ever to making connections and trying to meet with people, whether it's on Zoom and in some cases in person, but use this as an opportunity to reach out to people. And Amy said something in her comments about the alumni network. I think that's such a huge, huge point that I would like to make to everybody here. And I know that when I graduated, I did a very poor job of keeping in touch with people. And I think the Knox network, you know, there's such an easy way to connect through Knox Connect, and Eric can talk more about that at the end. But really, nobody better to reach out to than Knox alum. Nobody that's going to care about the importance of your education than somebody who also went to Knox. So I would just say, again, as you sort of think about where we're at from a pandemic, that we're at home, we're on our computers, no better time to reach out and start asking 5-minute favors to the alums. So my final thing before we get into questions is we all actually do have some fabulous prizes. We're gonna have 3 $1,000 stipends for micro internships. This is a concept that I just came across this summer and I just love it, which is this concept of being able to support somebody financially on a project, something that you're really interested in having on your resume. So from my perspective, it's awesome because you can focus on something that you're really interested in that's going to look great on your resume, and you'll be able to actually list it. And I think from your perspective, having the opportunity to work on something that you like and is important to you and you get paid for. So pick a topic that you think you'd like to have on your resume. Find a mentor. I'd start first in the alumni network, if you could, to really kind of support you on that. And then you're going to get an email from, this is for current Knox students. You're going to get an email with more information on this, but for 3 people, I'd love to personally support you with $1,000 stipend to have something that's really amazing on your resume as you continue to build that. And then for those of you that are interested, I would like to do a 30-minute one-to-one with 10 of the Knox students or alums, and you're going to be randomly selected. You actually have to want to do it, so we won't just make you talk with me. So if you're interested in that, you know, you can, we'll be able to, we'll select some people, and I guess, Eric, you'll probably reach out to them, like, since they're randomly selected. They might decide they don't want to be randomly selected before I know that.
That's correct, Jane. We're going to be, the Career Center and I, we're going to be reaching out to students here in the near future and sharing information about the micro internships, and kind of it's a great opportunity there. And then on the 30-minute one-on-ones, we'll be selecting those here just to be cognizant of time. We'll select those after the event, and then we'll notify everyone by email.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you. Thanks so much. So with that, let's get on to your questions, and I'll just I'll take the screen share off in a second, and we'll just say, you know, go to janeknows.com, or you can just reach to me directly at jane@janeknows.com. And I'd love for anybody that has a 5-minute favor to ask me. I'm really available and wanting to help. So with that, Eric, I think we have a few minutes to go through some questions. So should we do that for those of you that want to hang on for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I think it'd be an excellent time to maybe just open it up right off the bat and see if somebody would like to go first. I'm looking. It looks like John Nicolow's got a question. John, if you want to unmute.
So here's my 1981 yearbook, because I'm a classmate of Jane's. And I turned to page 154, and Jane, you're all wearing disguises, so I can't tell which one's you. You're in the second row apparently, but you all have masks on, so unfortunately I can't tell you. You can't see it in my thing here.
I can't see it in your background.
Let me turn off my background. In all honesty, just nice to see you, Jane, and thank you so much for doing this. I've worked with Eric as well, and it's very rewarding to help out fellow alums. And as you and I both know, if no one will be more receptive. There's the yearbook. There we go, right there. No one will be more receptive to working with you than a Knox alum, and I'm working with 1 or 2 right now. So I encourage you as students to reach out to alums. Other than your parents, it's your best network you possibly could have. But great job, Jane. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks, John. Thanks for, and just so John's like our person for our class. Is it like pulling teeth to get people to give you information every month?
And what Jane is referring to is I'm the class agent for our class, and I get all the emails that go into the Knox Alumnus magazine. And kudos to Jane. She offered free chocolate to anybody who sent her a note. I hope you got a lot of notes, Jane, from our last one. But no, our class is pretty good about responding when I bug them a little bit. But I still have great friends from many years ago, and we're still great friends today. We talk regularly, text, and we've got a Facebook page, and you know, us old farts do Facebook. But yeah, I stay very connected with our class, and I'm grateful to have people like Jane as part of our alumni group.
So John's an inspiration on that, and I'm going to actually give a word of caution, which is I was not connected with my class for a really long time, was not connected with Knox for a really long time. And I would really suggest that for those of you that are in school and those of you that are recent alums, like, don't lose connection, both from a people standpoint and also money. I'm not here to like fundraise for Knox, but what I will tell you is, even though when you're starting your career and you feel like you have no money, like, you got $5, you know, just do something to kind of get into the habit of giving, because you'll feel much more connected to the school. I mean, I think I had been out for maybe 25 years before I really started to get involved. And that's 25 years that I missed out on great guys like John to be connected to, and really great students. So anyway, next question. So I don't, it was kind of a commercial break.
Yeah, we had a really good question here from Rayanne, and she joined into your team breakout room. And her question was, for someone that has recently moved to a new city, do you have any advice for networking in a new place, especially during a pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rayanne. I think, you know, first of all, try to find industry associations, well, first of all, try to find if there's any Knox alums, of course, that's a good way to start. But I think try to find any industry groups that you can join. So like in Boulder, for example, and I'm in the food industry, there's an amazing organization called Naturally Boulder. And it's a trade association, and a bunch of companies are involved and a lot of individuals, and it gives you a chance to network and to meet people and go to events. So try to find things that you're interested in. It doesn't have to just be work related. If you play soccer, if you're a wine drinker, I mean, there's so many things that are happening virtually now since we can't get together. I would just kind of like put your sort of short list of stuff you're super interested in, and then go try to find like-minded people and where they're kind of convening. And that's kind of the best way to do it. Of course, I think, Rayanne, you were talking in our group about LinkedIn a little bit, and maybe sending notes out and people not always responding. Again, when somebody reaches out to me on LinkedIn and they just sort of say, I want to connect with you, I'm a lot less interested than if they say, hey, this is Eric Johnson, and, I'm a rancher in Galesburg, and I also work at Knox, and I see on your website that you like horses, like something that makes a connection versus just connect with me. So I would just say, try to figure out how you can be more personal, because we're all trying to connect, but just sort of saying, Jane, I want to know you is not nearly as personal as, hey, Jane, I see you have 3 horses and a dog, and I rescue animals too.
Another question that kind of follows that up, and a little bit more on the startup side of it. And so Jalen Brooks asked, how would you recommend it to someone who wants to start up a business but is struggling to find a concrete idea to start a business?
Well, first of all, starting a business is really difficult. Well, first of all, you probably should go to the startup semester here, right? I don't know, we'll put Tim in charge of that one probably in terms of starting a business. I would say that, just take your time. Like, just think about things that you're really interested in. I think the best entrepreneurs I've ever met are solving a problem. There's something that they're personally excited about. Again, I'm in the food industry, so I have met a lot of people that are gluten intolerant, so they develop a business there, or have some kind of an allergy, or vegan, or has some sort of something special that they really want to try to create to solve a problem for. So I would just keep exploring and realizing that starting a business takes a lot of tenacity, and you also really need to have a very key point of difference to be able to make it kind of pop out and be successful. So I would say really find something you're passionate about, but then also try to identify what's really the point of difference before you start it, so before you spend a lot of time and money chasing after something that might not be successful.
Isaac Juarez is on the call, class of 11. And Isaac, would you rather ask the question, or I can ask it for you? The question there was, are there any questions with the new WFH style of business that we should be asking during interviews that will signal to employers that we are up to date with the latest technologies, and will that be an asset?
Oh, that's a great question. So working from home it's something that's really, really different. And I would say in the 6 months that we've been doing it at Lily's, we have found that we're more productive than ever, than even when we were in the office. And we actually, I don't imagine that we'll ever have people come back full. I'm in the office today, and our offices are open, but it's totally voluntary. We're not making anybody come back, but we're actually finding that people want to come back to the office. It's kind of fun. But we're wearing masks. Obviously don't have one for the speech and I'm in my own office, but I would say, more than talking about how the technology of working from home, because again, if I can do like Zoom, you guys should be able to do Zoom. I think it's more about the things that I look for of working from home is, are you a self-starter? Can you work independently? Can you get your work done in an environment where you don't have a supervisor? So think more about the self-initiative part of it versus the technology part of it, because again, I think there's that we're all going to be able to be doing this and going to continue doing that. And so I'm going to almost expect that from you. But what I'd like to know is how you operate in that environment in terms of your own self-initiative and project management and getting things done.
There's a great question that, and they're all great questions, and thank you to everybody for submitting these, but I want to share the one that Deja asked. And Deja, I hopefully you'll get a good smile here. I see you. What is your advice for asking for raises or negotiating higher pay salaries? I know I'm worth more than I'm paid, but I'm not sure to bring it to my employer or supervisors.
Wow, Deja, that is a really good question. And it's a really hard question. So let me give you my perspective as the person that you would be coming to ask that question to, and what I would like to hear, because it's really difficult. First of all, in my particular role, what I like to know first of all is, are you doing the job the best that you can? So before you even start to talk about salaries or raises, which is, has your supervisor, and then we'll say in the case it's me, have I given you a really good review? Have I basically, are you doing everything that you need to do in your role, and are you going above and beyond? So I think that's kind of the starting point, which is before you start asking for more money, making sure that you're doing kind of what you're doing. The second thing I would say is, what I love to see from people is initiative. So if you were sitting down with me, Deja, and sort of said, hey, Jane, in my job, you've asked me to do all these things, and you said I've done a great job on that. And I think I can really take on more. And I think I can, actually help out. I see there's kind of a gap that in the company where you could really help out. And so I'd like to kind of talk to you about that. And I think if we could have a dialogue about what that means from a salary standpoint, because I do feel that I'm contributing a lot to the company, and because of that contribution and the more that I could do, I'd really like for you to look at my salary and give me some options on how I can actually make more money in this role. But do it from a role, I would just say salaries can be very divisive, and coming on strong as opposed to sort of making sure that I see and am agreeing with, you're like an amazing employee. Thank you so much for being an employee here. Now let's talk about salary, as opposed to trying to talk about salary before you sort of lay that basic of, I'm a great employee. Because like once I'm sort of nodding my head, Deja, that you're like a great employee, then it's a little bit harder for me to argue with salary versus you just coming in going, I know that Amy's making more money than I'm making, and I think I'm working harder than her. Like that just doesn't work, honestly. So I think, even though, Amy is making more money than you and she is doing a great job, but I think, but seriously, I would say really start from what you're doing and what you're bringing to the company and have a dialogue around it, because salaries are really hard to discuss and to negotiate.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good luck.
Thanks.
Before we go on to some of the pre-submitted questions, anybody want to unmute and ask any questions they've been thinking about here in the last couple minutes from the discussion? Looks like Jess Lee, you got one?
Yeah, I have a question. So when, I guess, undertaking 5-minute favors, how would you recommend furthering the relationship after the 5-minute favor, especially if it's someone you maybe haven't met before, or it's a more of a cold call, cold message? How would you recommend furthering that relationship after the 5-minute conversation?
That is a great question, because going back to the idea that dialogues are kind of two-way streets, what I would actually say, we'll say that you had a question for me, and I answered it, and then you said, hey, Jane, I know you have a career advice website, and it's targeted at my generation. How can I help you with that? Can I help you with content? Is there anything that I can do for you? So there's kind of a thing to sort of flip it in a way, which is, hey, I've gotten this thing from you, so how can I help you next? And then actually maybe ask, or even sort of say, hey, Jane, thanks for the answer on that. This is super helpful for you. Would you mind if I, maybe, in a week or so, just reached out to you again for another question, and sort of try to build a relationship like that. And then, if we started to have a rapport, I'd be like, Jessica, let's meet for coffee, or let's do a Zoom meeting or something. I love what you're doing, but kind of not expecting the heavy lift to begin with, but kind of inch into it. And then what I have found with mentors and I've been in a lot of programs where I've been matched with people, and like it doesn't always work great that way, because so much about mentoring is about chemistry. So the nice thing about 5-minute favors is you don't really have to have a lot of chemistry. You could just sort of get an answer. But if we actually had great chemistry, then it would be really easy for you to sort of follow up and say, hey, I've got one more question, or, can I help you in some way?
Great, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Laura just asked another question over in the chat room, and that was, what would you recommend on how to transition to a new profession or career?
Ooh, Laura, can you unmute and maybe give me a little bit more specific on that? So like, is it a big change? Are you trying to go back to school? Like just maybe a little bit more information?
Sure. So I'm currently in instructional design, and I'm honestly just really sore. Like my body's getting sore from being on a computer all day. So I'm looking to transition to something new, but my degrees right now are in education, higher ed, and then obviously my instructional design, I have that tech piece that helps as well.
Do you know what you want to transition to next, or is it more general in terms of what you're thinking about?
It's more general, I guess, just something that allows me not to sit at a screen all day. And that's the hard part, because it's like a lot of things right now kind of involve that.
And I think we're all like at this, but sort of like the current circumstance aside, one of the things I would do, and this is kind of true, even if you're not trying to transition, is doing a good self-inventory of what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like about the current job. So maybe what you don't like is being on the computer all day. Well, that's part of our lives right now, but there's probably bigger things, like in terms of the quality of work that you're doing and the impact that you're making. So whenever you're thinking about a transition, I don't know if anybody journals that's on here, but I really think journaling is a really important tool for writing down sort of what's on your mind. And as especially when you have bad days and good days, and you can kind of see a thread of things. But I think whenever you try to do a transition, I always like, and I say this whether it's transition in terms of career, or maybe you hate the company you're at and you want to leave. I always try to understand what's the root cause. Like, what are the things that you're really trying to get away from? And what are the things you really want to change? What are the things that you want to do different? And what are the things that you love that you don't want to change? And be super clear on that. Because one of the things I always like to say is, don't ever leave a job, go to a job. Now think about this. That sounds like it's the same thing, but it's actually really important. Leaving a job is like, oh my God, I can't stand Lily's. I can't wait to get out of here. I got to go find something else. Going to a job is saying, oh my gosh, like I have this opportunity to work at Knox. And that's so amazing. And so even though I'm leaving Lily's, which I'm not, and I'm not going to Knox as much as I know Beverly Holmes would love for me to come join her staff, but I think really sort of thinking about that, which is being really super clear on what's important to you and why you're leaving and what you're trying to go to. So I think, Laura, if you sort of think about your transition, is sort of say, of all the couple things you said, go a little bit deeper into what's working and what's not working and what your ideal job is. And then you can start thinking more about then how do you start to explore that, and how do you start to learn more about that next industry or make connections. Again, going back to the whole thing about mentoring, if there's something that you're interested in, how do you start to develop the network in that new industry, not just the one that you're in today?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good luck. Okay, Eric, you're on mute now.
The question that Craig from class of 94 asked, Craig, would you like to unmute and talk a little bit more, is about cover letters?
How important are cover letters? Are they necessary or not?
Absolutely, they're necessary. Again, I think that your resume should really speak to you, but the cover letter speaks to the company. And it really talks about what you're bringing to that company and that specific job, where in your resume, you're going to give all your experience. And as I read it, I'm going to be like, oh, Craig's done this and he's done this. And like, I get that. But I have to make the connection myself to why your resume is applicable to the job. So the cover letter is really important because you're making the connection for me to why you are the right person based on that resume for the job that I have. So it's really, really important, and it should be super custom. It shouldn't be just some generic, hey, I'm Craig, I've got the skills and I'm interested in the job. It needs to be, hey, Jane, I know there's a job in sales at Lily's, and you know, my experience is super deep in calling on Kroger and Walmart, etc. And I know that's exactly what you're looking for. I also bring really strong personal leadership. I've run big teams of people. But again, when I read that, it's like, oh, you know exactly what I'm looking for, and you've made the connection for me for why your resume actually should resonate with me in this particular job.
Yeah, that's good. Moving down, Anastasia, class of 17, had a question. Is it really necessary to go to graduate school in order to further your career?
You know, my first answer about graduate school, and again, you know, I have an MBA, is do it primarily if you want to keep learning and you want to build your skills. I think to go to graduate school to only think about furthering your career, you're missing the point of graduate school, which really is about learning and growing and building your skill set. And so you don't need to have a graduate degree. And you know, there might be some fields that you need to, but for the most part, I think it really needs to start from you as a person. Are you intellectually curious? Do you want to sort of build your skills? I mean, I have a gal here at Lily's who's in charge of social media, and she's in her early 30s. Has had a great career, and she's getting her MBA now at night at CU. And the reason for that is she really feels that she doesn't have the analytical skills and the strategic skills that she would like to be able to really build her career. And that she's not sure that she can actually get it in our company because we're a relatively small company. So think about your reasons for why you want to go back to school, because it's a lot of money. But if you kind of do it as more of a personal development with then an outcome of a job or a career, I think that motivation will help you meet your expectations a little bit better.
Eric, can I jump in on that?
Go for it.
Please, John.
So like Jane, I too was fortunate enough to get my MBA. And in those days I had work pay for it, which was a pretty sweet deal. AT&T paid for mine. But here's the rub. In the early 80s, it was like that ticket you had to have punched. It just was one of those things you just had to have. But what I found was I worked for a number of years first, and it helped me determine when I went to graduate school what I wanted to focus on. And therefore, I went into it with a better purpose as opposed to just doing it to punch a ticket, because back in those days, just everybody was in grad school. So I would say, if you're like she talked about going to a job, you know, I went to school because I want to learn something specific and enhance my background and make me more marketable. And fortunately, AT&T was kind enough to pay for it while I went. But I had more purpose when I went, as opposed to just, oh, well, everybody's going, I should go too. So I would look at it in this day and age, you know, I would look at it that way, that what's your purpose? What's the end game? What are you trying to accomplish?
You know, John, just to build on that, that's such a great point. Because I think the other thing is, you know, I only had a year in between my Knox and getting my degree. And I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. I literally brought nothing to the class because I had no work experience. I think the other thing is it sounds like, John, you had a few years before you were already working at AT&T when you went back. I mean, part of what you want to do is get the experience of the people that have experience there and really be able to add value. And I think that really is something that if you just kind of do like I did, where you go to undergraduate right to graduate school, you're missing that added value thing. I don't know if you'd agree with that, John.
100%. My marketing teacher didn't know squat in grad school because he had been, no offense to academia, but I think he had been teaching for 40 years and he had been out of it, the real world, for so long, it was almost a joke. And I think to a certain degree, because I had the experience 4 or 5 years under my belt, I was able to, of real world experience, the collaborative process that we were able to share, and the more recent knowledge that was more relevant, it had a bigger impact on me and hopefully on my classmates. But yeah, I think in this day and age, don't just go to go because everybody's going. go with some sort of purpose. And again, I think having that gap of about 4 years before I went was very helpful to me.
For sure.
I'm going to turn the mic open to you, Chen. Is it you, Chen?
Yeah.
Hey, he's got a question.
Hi.
So I'm currently a freshman, and I will be majoring in STEM, particularly a physics major. So what would the employers aiming for with people like me in my field?
Wow. Tell me, what are you thinking about in terms of the kind of jobs that you're looking for? Because I may not be the best person to answer that question, but I want to make sure I understand. So as a freshman, what are you, I mean, first of all, you have plenty of time to think about it and not worry about it because you're a freshman, and you might change your mind a bunch of times between now and then 3 years from now. So like, be cool about that. That's not a big deal at all. But what are you currently thinking now in terms of a job?
So eventually I want to go into engineering. So I'm going to be in the 3+2 engineering program here. And after when I graduate, I want to work in the aerospace industry.
So is anybody on the call can help me out on some good advice on that for you, Chin? I'm a little dumbfounded.
Well, I will jump in from the standpoint of, say, there are some folks that are Knox alums, and if you'd want to connect with me sometime after this and just email me, I would love to connect you with Carol Craig down in Florida, and maybe you can ask her some questions. Carol was a graduate of '89 and is in aerospace engineering. And also, too, Scott, why don't you say a few words about some of the thoughts you'd have as far as sharing some advice with him?
I think you saw me turn my screen on, didn't you, Eric?
I did.
Yes. So first of all, I would say that most employers want someone like you who is on this call as a freshman, because they like that proactivity. They like someone that's thinking about this now. So I'd like to congratulate you for that. Like Eric said, I think making some connections, also looking at some experiential opportunities is going to help you out so that you can try out aerospace, you can try out some other possibilities, and really make a good informed decision over these 3-4 years and through your 3-2 program. So we can help you with that in many, many ways.
And join the Knox alumni groups on LinkedIn, and join aerospace groups on LinkedIn, and watch that feed and that traffic, because then you may see alums that are in that space. And as Jane said earlier, I will never turn down a phone call or an email from a Knox alum because I know what they went through. I don't think students appreciate how powerful this network is if you just take advantage of it.
We're creeping up here on 6:20, and I think we've covered all. I wanted to take some time to ask the questions, especially those of you who have stayed with us here through the entire program. But I'd like to take one last call. If you haven't had your question answered, we'd be glad to open that up at this time. So let's take a few moments, and if you have something, please feel free to open your mic and ask your question.
Well, somebody's waiting to raise their hand. I would just say, Eric, this is so great. I mean, having John and Scott jump in, I think maybe for your next virtual series, you need to seed a couple of alums that'll actually help in the question and answer, because I think it's a lot more fun hearing from other voices. And I think that just sort of, maybe you have someone that just sort of kicks it off, and then you actually have a little bit more of a panel or dialogue, because I think it just really adds a lot more richness to this discussion with the extra comments that those guys had too. So just as a thought.
We are certainly learning as we go. I mean, Beverly would attest to as well. I mean, we talk about ideas probably daily, if not every day, and my colleagues in the Career Center. I mean, we are continuously discussing ideas of ways we can do virtual programs. And to all of you who are on the call, the best advice is the advice that and the feedback that you give to us. If there's something that you have an idea for, please share with us, and we would welcome that, because we've got our Knox Together series has a lot of ideas, and we're going to try and do some programs monthly, if not every month and a half. And certainly we welcome ideas from you, because that's what we'd like to do. But Jane, before I give some final remarks, I'd like to turn it back for you to say a few final closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for staying on for almost 2 hours. That's kind of impressive across the board. And I think the only thing I would say is just something that Amy started, and then John and Scott were talking about. Like, this is really tap into the alumni network. It's just such a big asset that only Knox students have as a resource. And it's big, and we've got however many, as 180 years or a lot of years of, we'll just say for the last 50 years of those of us that are still alive to be able to help you. There's a lot of alums that are in the system, and give money to Knox too. I think it's super important to start that connection of giving early on. Again, it could be like $5, but it makes a difference, and it'll make you remember every year that you really want to pay back the great education that you got. So with that,
we got a great question over here in the chat space, and it came from Lindsay Scott. Lindsay, it's great to have you on the call. I would like to have you unmute if you don't mind, and I'd rather you ask.
We know that from our group that Lindsay is in rural, I think, Virginia, and doesn't have very good internet access. So Eric,
no
need to see the question.
Yep, I sure will. Lindsay's question is, I would really like to get some work experience before I go on to further education. I already have an MSc, so that I am not out of touch with the real world. But I can't even seem to get an interview for any job I apply to, so I am currently in touch with possible PhD advisors and looking for funding opportunities. Do you have any advice about how to make yourself stand out in a resume and cover letter so that I don't end up in school forever without ever getting job experience?
Well, I have to say that one of the key things, Lindsay, is this is why a network is so important, because in the world of sending your resume out with a fabulous resume and an unbelievable cover letter to somebody that doesn't know you, the chances of getting a job are very, very small. It's just you're like in a pile, and maybe you're not even in a pile, you're on an electronic file, which is even harder than if you're on a pile on my desk. So it really is about reaching out to your connections. I mean, I don't know enough about the kind of jobs that you're interviewing for and that you're not getting, but I would say, school is a great option if that's your passion, but if you're doing it because you can't find a job, then I would really take some time to sort of sort through what's important. Again, what's important to you, what's the list of stuff that you really want to do, and then how do you figure out in your network who can help you get something, and maybe start at the ground floor. I mean, sometimes it's really hard if you have a vision of the job that you want to have, but maybe that's not the best way to get into a company. I mean, one of the key things I look for is work ethic and people doing whatever it takes. And if you are trying to start your career in a not, sort of outside of education, find something where you can do whatever it takes and get in and show what your work ethic is, and you'll actually be surprised. That still works in this day and age. If anybody remembers Horatio Alger, I mean, there really is a concept about putting in hard work and doing whatever you can, and those of us that are employing people really appreciate that.
LinkedIn's very powerful for finding those connections at a company. It might be a second or third degree connection, but if you can connect to them and they can get you to go foot in the door, maybe your resume then bubbles up. Otherwise, as Jane said, you're on an electronic pile among thousands.
Thank you, John, for sharing your thoughts too on that. And with that, thank you for everybody who asked questions. Jane provided her email address. If you go to the Knox website, and you can go to the Basham Family Center for Career Success. You can find my information on the alumni website. You can also find the Startup Term Professor's information on the website. And so great opportunities there. I posted the information for Knox Connect over in the chat space. but I certainly encourage you to check those out as far as a networking standpoint. And then if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to add you to our Knox alumni group, which has a great network in there, and it's a great way to make connections and make reach outs to alumni. Jane, I want to tell you how much I appreciate it, and thank you so much for taking your time and doing a wonderful presentation this evening. Certainly being a part of a community.
I wanted to say, and that's why I unmuted there too, so thanks for saying that, Eric.
Yeah. You know, being a part of a community right now, I mean, it looks and feels different these days, including the Knox alumni community. And while you may not be able to be on campus for homecoming or reunion weekends that we have and gather as you normally would for a Knox Club event, there are still plenty of opportunities like this to connect with fellow alumni and engage with the college. And so my encouragement to you is to visit, our website, knox.edu. Click on alumni and then go to the alumni events page. And I really encourage you to learn more about our very first and very unique Stay in Your Own Homecoming, which will be October 23rd through the 25th, along with a number of great virtual events that we've scheduled for the remainder of 2020, both through the Knox Together series and along with the career events we're doing. So we've posted those events on the alumni events website, so you can see those. We have some career fairs. We have a number of networking opportunities coming up. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us. And remember to connect, take part, and give back. Good night.
See you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.